Alina had grown up believing that family meant protection, warmth, and trust. For most of her childhood, that belief had felt true. Her father had been a quiet, hard-working man who kept the small farm running, even during the harshest winters. He always reminded his children that people should care for one another, no matter how hard life became. Alina held those words close, even when things around her started to change. She never imagined those words would become painful memories one day. After her father passed away, the farm fell into the hands of her two older brothers, Mark and Jonah. At first, the changes seemed small. They started spending more time in the nearby town, staying out late, returning home tired and irritated. Alina tried to help them with the farm work, thinking they needed time to adjust to their loss. But the truth was far darker. Mark and Jonah had fallen into gambling, something their father had always warned them about. The men they played with were not friends, and the debts they owed grew quickly. Alina did not know any of this. She only noticed how restless and angry her brothers had become. Weeks passed and the brothers grew desperate. Instead of trying to fix their mistakes, they looked for shortcuts. Alina was unaware of the private meetings taking place behind the barn, or the whispers about a way to settle things. She continued caring for the animals, washing clothes and cooking meals, doing everything she could to hold their home together. But the home was not truly theirs anymore. Debt had wrapped itself around her brothers like a strong rope, pulling them deeper into trouble. One evening, as the sky turned purple and the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark told Alina to pack a small bag. He said she was going to stay with relatives for a while. Alina felt confused but did not argue. She trusted him. She thought maybe they were worried about something or maybe needed space to sort out their problems. She packed a few clothes, a small keepsake from her father, and a blanket. But when she stepped outside, expecting to see a familiar wagon or a family friend, she instead saw three rough-looking men waiting beside their horses. Their eyes were cold, their expressions unreadable. Alina froze for a moment, sensing something was wrong. Jonah nudged her shoulder and told her to go with them, saying they would take her to a safer place. His voice wavered, but she didn't know the reason behind it. The tallest of the three men grabbed her bag and tied it to his saddle. Alina looked back at her brothers, wishing they would explain what was happening. But their eyes avoided hers. They stood stiffly, guilt written across their faces, yet neither of them said a word that made sense. The men urged her forward, and helplessly Alina climbed onto one of their horses. Her heart pounded as they rode away from the home she had known all her life. The journey was long and unsettling. Alina tried asking where they were taking her, but the men ignored her questions. Their silence felt heavier with each passing hour. She realized something was terribly wrong. When they stopped at a trading outpost the next morning, she overheard a conversation, words that shattered her trust. One man said her brother settled the debt. She's the payment. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She stepped backward, her hands trembling. She couldn't believe her brothers would hand her over like an object. It felt like the ground beneath her feet had opened, swallowing everything she trusted. The men did not treat her roughly, but their intentions were clear. They wanted to take her to another settlement, where she would be handed off like property. Alina's fear grew as the day passed. She thought of running, but she had no idea where she was or how far the next town might be. She had no food, no water, and no weapon. But she had something stronger, her will to survive. That night, they stopped at an abandoned way station. It was a lonely building with broken windows and a half-collapsed roof. The cold night wind whistled through the dry grass. The men lit a small fire, talking about plans she didn't understand. One of them fell asleep early. The others sat with their backs turned, whispering. Alina knew she only had one small chance. Her heartbeat thudded loudly inside her chest as she took slow, quiet steps backward, holding her breath with each movement. When she reached the shadows away from the fire, she turned and ran. She didn't look back. The desert night was cold, and her feet hit sharp stones and dry plants, but she didn't stop. Tears blurred her vision, but she pushed forward, driven by fear and determination. If they caught her, she didn't know what would happen. But if she kept running, at least she had a chance. Hours passed as she moved through the dark landscape. The moon became her only guide. The desert seemed endless, stretching in all directions with no shelter and no sign of life. Elena's legs grew weak. Every breath hurt. She stumbled more than once, falling to her knees, but she forced herself to continue. She told herself she couldn't give up, not after what she had escaped. Just when she thought she would collapse and never rise again, she saw a faint light far in the distance. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the light remained steady, warm, and real. Hope sparked inside her. She kept walking toward it, each step heavier than the last, as she drew closer. The light revealed a large property with tall wooden gates and several barns. She saw the outline of a grand ranch house, strong, well-built, and glowing softly under lantern light. The sight felt like a miracle, but Elena barely had enough strength to reach the gate. She took one more step and then collapsed, the rough dirt touching her cheek as her world faded into darkness. At dawn, the ranch owner stepped outside. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, sharp eyes, and a calm but powerful presence. His name was Luke Carver, known throughout the territory as the richest and fiercest rancher. People respected him. Some feared him. Luke believed in hard work, fairness, and strict rules. And one of his strongest rules was simple. No strangers were allowed on his land without permission. But when he found Elena unconscious near his gate, covered in dust and trembling from the cold, something inside him paused. He studied her carefully. She was tired, frightened, and clearly running from something. Luke was not a man who ignored someone in need. Even though he rarely let people close, he called the ranch hands over and told them to carry her inside. The workers exchanged surprised glances, but followed his instructions immediately. Luke watched quietly as they brought her into the warm ranch house, where she was given water and a place to rest. Elena did not wake for hours. She slept deeply, as if her body had finally found a safe place to stop fighting. When she opened her eyes, she found herself lying on a clean bed, wrapped in a blanket, with sunlight streaming through a window. For the first time in many days, she felt a small sense of safety, and that was how her new, unexpected chapter began in the land of a man known for his strength and silence. A man she had never met before, but who had unknowingly saved her life the moment she collapsed at his gate. Elena woke slowly, as if her body was unsure whether it was safe to open her eyes. Everything felt soft and warm around her, so different from the cold ground she remembered falling on. When she finally opened her eyes, she stared at a wooden ceiling with beams polished smooth by years of work. She turned her head and realized she was in a quiet, comfortable room with a window that let in golden morning light. For a moment, Elena didn't know where she was. Then her memories rushed back, the long run through the desert, the distant lights she had followed, and her collapse near the gate of a large ranch. Her heart began to beat faster. She pushed herself up slowly, feeling weak but relieved to be alive. On a small table beside her bed was a cup of water and a folded cloth. Someone had taken care of her, someone she didn't know. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door opened. A tall man stepped inside, his footsteps steady and firm. Elena felt her breath catch as she looked at him. He was strong-looking, with broad shoulders and a calm expression that carried both power and control. His clothes were simple jeans, boots, a work shirt, but everything about him showed that he was a man used to responsibility. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "You're awake," he said in a deep, even tone. Elena nodded, sitting straighter. "Yes, thank you." Her voice sounded small. "You were at my gate before dawn," he said. "Passed out." He paused for a moment, studying her face. "I'm Luke Carver. This is my ranch." Elena had heard stories about that name before. People in nearby towns spoke about the Carver Ranch with respect. Some even whispered about Luke's strict rules and fierce temper when someone crossed him. But looking at him now, Elena didn't see anger, only firmness, and something else she couldn't name. Luke stepped closer and placed the water cup in front of her. "To drink, you were dehydrated." Elena held the cup with trembling hands. She took a sip, grateful for the simple kindness. After a long silence, Luke spoke again. "Do you remember how you got here?" Elena lowered her eyes. "I walked. Or I ran. I don't know. Just remember seeing light." Luke nodded, as if that matched what he suspected. "And before that?" Elena hesitated, her stomach tightened. She didn't know if she should tell him everything. But his calm presence made her feel she could trust him more than anyone she'd seen in a long time. She took a slow breath. Some men, they took me. My brothers gave me to them. Luke's eyes sharpened slightly, but his voice remained controlled. Why would your brothers do that? Alina swallowed hard. They had debts. Eh? They said it was the only way. I didn't know, they just told me to pack. Luke stayed silent for a moment, absorbing her words. He didn't interrupt, didn't question her honesty. His silence wasn't cold, it was thoughtful. And you escaped, he finally said. Yes. Alina looked at her hands. I didn't know where I was running. I just knew I couldn't let them take me anywhere. Luke crossed his arms, leaning slightly against the wall. They'll come looking, he said quietly. Alina felt fear rise inside her like a cold wave. She pressed her fingers together. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring trouble here. Luke shook his head. You didn't bring it. Trouble belongs to the ones who hurt you. His words surprised her. Most people blamed the weakest person for causing problems, but Luke didn't. Alina looked up at him, watching his steady expression. She sensed a strength in him that came not only from physical power, but also from character. You can stay here for now, he added. Rest until you decide what you want to do. Alina blinked, confused. You're letting me stay? Luke nodded once. I don't send people back to danger. Not on my land. A warm, quiet relief spread through Alina's chest. She had never expected kindness from a stranger, especially not from a man known for being strict and guarded. Later that day, one of the ranch hands, a friendly older woman named Ruth, came to check on her. Ruth brought her some soup, fresh clothes, and a gentle smile. Mr. Carver found you half dead, Ruth said, as she helped Alina sit up. But he don't take strangers in, but something made him bring you inside. You must have been through a lot. Alina didn't know how to explain everything she felt, so she simply thanked her. After eating, she tried standing. Her legs were still weak, but she refused to stay in bed all day. Ruth guided her outside to get some fresh air. The ranch was larger than Alina had imagined. Wide fields stretched across the land with horses running freely under the open sky. Workers moved with purpose, feeding animals, fixing fences, and carrying supplies. Everyone seemed busy, yet there was order in everything they did. Alina watched quietly. It's feeling like she had stepped into a different world. Luke appeared near the barn, giving instructions to two ranch hands. When he glanced toward her, Alina felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't used to being noticed in a way that didn't feel threatening. He walked over to her. You should be resting. Alina looked down, a little embarrassed. I wanted to see where I was. Luke studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the open fields. This land is big. You'll have space to breathe. Alina nodded slowly. It's beautiful. Luke didn't respond, but she caught a faint hint of approval in his eyes. She sensed that he wasn't a man who used many words. His actions spoke louder. Over the next few days, Lena helped Ruth with light chores, folding laundry, washing dishes, sweeping. It felt good to do something useful again. She didn't want to be a burden. She also spent time sitting on the porch, watching the horizon and thinking about her future. She knew the men who had taken her might return. She knew her brothers might come looking too. But for the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to think beyond fear. Luke watched her quietly during those days. He didn't hover, but he made sure she had what she needed: food, rest, and space. There was something in the way. He looked at her sometimes, as if he was trying to understand what kind of strength kept her going. One evening, Alina gathered enough courage to thank him properly. She approached him while he was checking the horses. It's Mr. Carver, I don't know how to say this, but thank you for everything. Luke turned slightly toward her. You don't owe me thanks. Alina shook her head. I do. You didn't have to help me. Luke tied the horse's rope and looked directly at her. Helping someone in trouble isn't something I decide based on rules. It's something I do because it's right. Alina felt a lump form in her throat. Most people don't think that way. Luke's gaze softened, just a little. Most people haven't lived through enough to know better. His voice held a quiet story, something she sensed, but didn't ask about. Somehow, Alina felt closer to him in that moment. She didn't know why, but she trusted him more than she had trusted anyone in years. As the days passed, rumors started reaching nearby towns. People talked about a mysterious young woman staying at the Carver Ranch. Some said she was a traveler. Others invented stories that she was related to Luke somehow. Rumors traveled quickly, and trouble was never far behind. Alina didn't know these whispers had begun, but Luke did. And he knew that sooner or later, someone from her past would arrive. Yet, he didn't push her away. Instead, he watched over her quietly, as if preparing to stand between her and whatever was coming. Alina had arrived at his gate by chance. But without realizing it, she had stepped into the one place where she would no longer be treated as a burden or a bargain. She had stepped into the home of a man who protected what mattered, and slowly, without either of them admitting it, she was becoming part of that. Today on the show, we're diving into the world of economic indicators. These are the numbers that tell us how the economy is doing, things like GDP, unemployment rates, and consumer confidence. But what do these indicators really mean? How are they? Trouble had a way of finding the weak first, and Alina knew it deep inside her heart even before anyone said a word. She felt it in the air, in the way some ranch hands whispered quietly while working, in the way Luke watched the horizon longer than usual. He never told her what he was thinking. But Alina could sense that something was building far beyond the calm ranch fields. The rumors had spread through nearby towns. Faster than either of them expected. People talked about a young woman staying at the Carver Ranch, a place known for privacy and order. Some townsfolk were curious. Others were suspicious. But the ones most interested, the ones dangerous enough to follow the whispers, were the men who had once tried to take her away. One morning, Alina was helping Ruth hang laundry when she heard the distant sound of hooves. Many riders came in and out of the ranch, but this sound felt different, heavier, faster, urgent. Luke appeared from around the barn just as the sound grew louder. His face tightened slightly and he looked toward the road. Ruth noticed it too. She placed a hand on Alina's shoulder. "Go inside, dear," she whispered. Alina's heart jumped. "Who is it?" Ruth didn't answer. She only gently pushed her toward the house. Alina hurried inside and stood near the window, trying not to be seen as she looked outside. She saw a group of riders approaching the ranch, gate 6 men on dark horses, dressed rough and carrying the same heavy presence as the men who had once taken her. They slowed near the fence, waiting for someone to come out. Luke walked toward them with 3 ranch hands behind him. Their steps were strong and unified, like men who were ready for any challenge that came their way. The ranch hands weren't armed with anything more than tools, but their firm stance showed they were not afraid. Alina's breath caught in her throat when she recognized 2 faces among the riders. The same men who had spoken about her like she was something to trade. Her stomach twisted. The memory of her long run through the desert felt fresh again, and fear tightened around her chest. But she forced herself to stay still, because she wanted to hear what would happen. One of the men leaned forward on his saddle and spoke loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Carver, we're here for the girl." Luke stood tall and calm. "There's no girl here for you." The man laughed, a rough sound. "We heard she's hiding on your land. Her brothers want her back, and we'll be taking her." Lena flinched at the mention of her brothers. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't understand how they could hand her over so easily. She didn't want them to face danger, but she also knew she could not go back. She would never be safe if she left this ranch. Luke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Whatever deal you think you had," he said calmly, "it doesn't matter here. She's not property. She doesn't belong to anyone." The men shifted uncomfortably at Luke's firm tone, but the leader didn't back down. "We've got rights over her," he insisted. She ran away. "We're here to take her back." Luke crossed his arms. "You don't have any rights?" "Not on my land. Not anywhere." The ranch hands behind him stood straighter, ready for whatever might come next. Alina could see the tension from where she watched through the window. She felt guilt press against her chest like a heavy stone. She didn't want to cause trouble for Luke or anyone working for him. Another man rode forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're making a big mistake protecting her, Carver," he growled. Luke took one step closer to the gate, and suddenly the air changed. Alina had heard stories about Luke Carver, stories of his fierce temper and strong sense of justice. But she had also seen his gentle side, the way he let her stay, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he made sure she felt safe. Now she saw another side of him, the side that scared cruel men. "This land is mine," Luke said, his voice low but sharp. "My land, my rules. No one takes anything from here unless I allow it, and I don't allow you to take her." The leader's eyes narrowed. "We'll be back," he said, "and next time we won't be talking." The riders pulled their horses back and turned around, kicking up dust as they rode away. Alina watched them disappear, her heart still pounding. She wanted to run outside, to thank Luke, to tell him she was sorry. But her legs wouldn't move. Luke and his men returned to the barn area, their expressions serious. Alina stepped away from the window before they could see her watching. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling slightly. The fear from earlier still lingered, but something else was growing inside her admiration. No one had ever stood up for her like that. No one had ever protected her with such certainty. A few minutes later, Luke entered the house. Alina stood quickly, unsure what to say. Luke looked at her with the same calm eyes he had earlier. "You saw them," he said simply. Alina nodded. Her voice came out soft. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this trouble to come to your ranch." Luke shook his head. "You're not the cause. They are." Alina lowered her gaze. "But if I wasn't here, you are here," Luke said, cutting her off gently. "And I don't regret helping you." Alina felt something warm settle inside her chest, something that felt like safety mixed with trust. She looked up at him slowly. "Do you think they'll come back?" "Yes," Luke said honestly. "Men like them don't give up easily. But they won't get far." Alina wanted to believe him, and part of her did. But she also felt afraid for him. "They might try to fight you," she whispered. Luke's expression didn't change. "I've faced worse than them, and I'm not alone." He gestured slightly toward the window, where ranch hands continued working. They were loyal to him not because of fear, but because of respect. Alina realized how strong Luke's world was, built not only on his wealth, but also on the loyalty of everyone who lived and worked around him. That evening, Alina sat quietly on the porch steps, watching the sun lower behind the mountains. The sky turned soft shades of pink and orange. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her thoughts. She knew her brothers must have spoken to those men. They probably told lies, maybe even convinced the men that Alina had stolen something. Anything to avoid admitting their own mistake. But Alina knew one thing with absolute clarity: she could never return home. Home didn't exist anymore, not in the way she remembered. As she sat there, she heard footsteps behind her. Luke took a seat at the other end of the porch, leaving space between them, but sharing the same quiet. "You're thinking too much," he said gently. Alina smiled faintly. "I can't help it." Luke looked out toward the fields. "Fear is loud, but it doesn't decide the future." Alina didn't answer right away. She let his words sink in. "I didn't mean to bring danger to you," she said again, softer this time. Luke shook his head. "You didn't bring danger? You brought truth. And truth always brings its own kind of trouble." Alina looked at him, surprised at his words. Luke rarely spoke deeply, but when he did, every word felt meaningful. "Do you think they'll hurt you?" she asked. "No," Luke answered calmly. "But even if they tried, I'd still stand between them and you." Alina felt her breath catch. She wasn't sure why his words brought warmth to her eyes, but they did. No one had ever stood between her and danger before. Not like this. The ranch lights flickered softly as the evening deepened. And Alina realized something important: she wasn't alone anymore. Luke wasn't just protecting her. He was making it clear that she mattered, even though more trouble would come. Alina felt something new growing inside her, something that gave her strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was slowly becoming someone who could stand on her own feet again. And without knowing it, she was becoming someone Luke was willing to fight for. Calculated. And how should we interpret them? We'll break it all down for you with the help of some experts to make sense of the numbers that shape our world. For a few days after the riders left the ranch, everything remained quiet. Too quiet. Alina tried to help with daily chores to keep her mind busy, but whenever she walked outside, she found herself scanning the distant road. She knew trouble had not ended. She knew men like those did not accept defeat easily. Luke understood this too, though he continued working as calmly as he always did. The ranch hands also felt the tension. They worked with sharper focus, checking the fences more often, keeping tools close. Even the horses seemed restless, as if sensing what was coming. Alina felt a strange mix of fear and guilt, but there was also something else growing deep inside her: hope. Hope that maybe after all this was over, she could build a life not shaped by fear or betrayal. One morning, Lena walked out to the porch and saw Luke standing in the open field, his hands resting on his belt. He was watching something far away. Curious and worried, she stepped closer. When she looked where he was looking, her breath froze. Dust clouds rose in the distance. Horses, many of them. Coming fast. Alina felt her heart drop. Without thinking, she stepped back toward the door, but Luke reached out and placed a steady hand on her shoulder, not to stop her, but to reassure her. "Stay inside," he said softly. "Ruth will stay with you." Alina nodded, though every part of her wanted to stand outside with him. She hurried inside and watched from the window, her hands gripping the wooden frame so tightly her knuckles turned white. The riders approached the ranch gate again, but this time the group was larger. Her brothers were with them, Mark and Jonas, sitting stiffly on their horses with troubled expressions. Behind them were the same rough men from before, along with a few others who looked equally hardened. The leader of the group rode forward and called out, "Carver, this ends today." Luke walked toward them, not hurrying, not slowing. His ranch hands followed behind, each standing with a firm posture. They were not carrying weapons except for tools, but their confidence was clear. They trusted Luke completely. Elena's brothers looked around nervously, their eyes darting from Luke to the men behind them. They didn't look like men who were in control. They looked like men who were stuck in something they no longer knew how to escape. Luke stopped at the gate but did not open it. His voice carried across the quiet air. "You had no right to take her," he said. "And you have no right to ask for her." Mark swallowed hard. "She belongs with family," he said, repeating words someone had clearly forced him to say. "We just want her back." Lena shook her head from behind the window, her eyes filling with sadness. She had wanted to believe her brothers could one day change, that they might regret what they had done. But now she saw fear in their eyes, not courage. They had let others decide her fate again. Luke took a step forward. "Family doesn't hand someone over like a trade. Family protects." "You failed that." Jonah opened his mouth as if to argue, but the leader of the rough men cut him off. "Enough talking," he growled. "We're taking the girl. Stand aside." Luke's voice remained calm, but there was a warning in it. "No one will cross this gate to harm her. Not now. Not ever." The leader's face twisted with anger. "You think you can stop us alone?" Luke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced back at his ranch hands, men and women who had worked beside him for years. They stepped closer, forming a line behind him. Even from inside the house, Alina could feel the strength of their unity. Luke turned back to the men. "I'm not alone." At that exact moment, another sound echoed from the distance: hoofbeats. A single rider approached from the right path, carrying a badge on his vest. It was the local marshal, a man known for enforcing the law in the harsh territory. The marshal rode up to the group and stopped. Between Luke and the outsiders, he scanned the scene with sharp eyes before speaking. "I heard there was trouble brewing," he said. "And here I find a group of armed men trying to force someone to go with them." The leader tried to mask his frustration. "Marshal, this is a family matter." The marshal looked at Elena's brothers. "Is that true? Are you trying to take her back home?" Mark and Jonah exchanged helpless glances. Jonah finally spoke, his voice barely steady. We can't pay what we owe, so you handed your sister to settle the debt?" the marshal asked sharply. Neither brother answered. Their silence said enough. The marshal turned back to the leader. "You know the law. No person can be used to pay a debt, not here. Not anywhere in this territory." The leader frowned. "She ran away from us. You had no claim over her," the marshal stated firmly. "If you try to take her by force, you'll be the ones breaking the law. Not Carver. Not the girl." The men behind the leader shifted uneasily. They were used to getting their way through intimidation, not through legal threats. The marshal placed a hand on the handle of his holstered weapon, not drawing it, just reminding them of the difference between courage and foolishness. "This is my final warning," the marshal continued. "Leave now. If you come back trying to take her, you'll face charges you can't talk your way out of." The leader clenched his fists but finally nodded, realizing the fight was lost. He pulled his horse back, glaring at Luke as if blaming him for everything. The group turned their horses around, kicking up dust as they rode away. Elena's brothers hesitated before leaving. Mark looked back at the ranch, regret flickering in his eyes. But it was too late. They had made their choices, and Elena had made hers. When the men disappeared beyond the trees, Luke exhaled quietly, though his posture remained strong. The ranch hands slowly stepped back, their tense expressions easing. The marshal nodded at Luke. "You did the right thing," he said. "You protected someone who needed it." Luke gave a small nod of respect. "Thank you for coming when you did." "I always come when it's needed," the marshal replied before riding away. Elena finally stepped outside, her legs trembling as she walked toward Luke. When he saw her, his expression softened. She stopped a few steps away, unsure of what to say. Luke closed the distance himself. "It's over," he told her gently. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief so deep it shook her. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Luke said. "You're safe here. That's all that matters." Elena took a shaky breath. What happens now? Am I supposed to leave? Or... Luke looked at her for a long moment, his eyes steady and calm as always. "You're free to go anywhere you want," he said. "You're not trapped. You're not owned. You decide your life now." Elena felt her heart twist. Leaving was an option. She could try to find a new town, start over. But as she stood there on the porch, seeing the open fields and the strong, quiet man in front of her, she realized something she had been feeling silently for days. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "Not anymore. This place, it feels like home. And you've treated me with more respect than anyone ever has." Luke didn't speak right away. He searched her expression, making sure she meant what she said. When he finally spoke, his voice was warm and sincere. "If this place feels like home," he said, "then stay. Don't go anywhere you don't want to go." Elena felt a small, hopeful smile appear on her face. "I want to stay," Luke nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Then stay, as long as you wish." The sun warmed the porch as a quiet peace settled between them. Elena felt the weight of her past finally lifting. She was no longer someone's burden. She was no longer running. She was choosing her future. Luke reached out gently, not grabbing her, not pulling her, just offering his hand. A simple gesture, a safe gesture. Elena placed her hand in his, and everything inside her felt steady for the first time in years. The wide frontier stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges and new beginnings. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. She had found shelter in the strongest ranch in the territory, and in the heart of a man who believed she deserved better. Together, they stepped toward a future built on choice, respect, and hope, something brighter than anything she had ever imagined.